The Heartbeat Beneath the Moon. Chapter 1: Night Shift. The hum of the life support systems was the only constant sound in the control module, a rhythmic whisper that had become the backdrop to my existence. I glanced at the chronometer on the wall, 02:47 Lunar Standard Time. Another sleepless night on the far side of the moon, another shift alone with my thoughts and the vast, silent expanse of space pressing against the reinforced windows. My name is Dr. Ira Stone, Chief Structural Engineer for Lunar Construction Site Alpha, though tonight I felt more like a glorified night watchman. The base was in its third month of construction, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules that would eventually house 40 researchers and support staff. But for now, it was just me and the automated systems, keeping vigil over the most ambitious construction project humanity had ever attempted beyond Earth. I activated my personal recorder, a habit I developed during my first Mars mission. The psychologists back at Houston said it helped maintain psychological stability during long isolation periods. I wasn't sure about that, but it certainly helped me organize my thoughts. Log entry, Sol 87 of Lunar Base Construction, I began, my voice sounding strangely hollow in the empty control room. Night shift continues as planned, all systems nominal. The drilling operation for Foundation Complex Delta is proceeding ahead of schedule. The new percussive rotary system is working better than expected in the compacted regolith. Outside the primary viewport, the lunar landscape stretched endlessly under the harsh glare of artificial lighting. Earth hung low on the horizon, a blue marble that seemed impossibly distant despite being only 3 days' travel away. Sometimes I wondered if the isolation was getting to me, if the weight of all that empty space was slowly compressing my mind like the tectonic pressures that shaped these ancient lunar plains. The drilling rig sat like a metallic insect in the middle of the construction zone, its articulated arm extended downward into the regolith. Foundation Complex Delta would be the deepest structure yet attempted on the lunar surface, a research facility extending 30 meters below the surface, designed to study the moon's mysterious internal composition. The geological surveys had shown unusual density variations in this region, and the science team was eager to investigate what lay beneath. I checked the drilling telemetry on my console. The bore had reached 28.7 meters depth, approaching the target depth where our surveys indicated a transition from the loose regolith to what should have been bedrock. The drill bit was encountering resistance, as expected, but something about the readings made me uneasy. The torque fluctuations were irregular, not the steady increase we'd anticipated when hitting solid rock. Drilling parameters showing anomalous readings, I continued my log. Torque patterns inconsistent with expected bedrock contact. The engineers back on Earth will want to review this data, might need to adjust the drilling algorithm for future operations. The truth was, I'd never seen readings quite like this. In my 15 years as a planetary engineer, I drilled through every type of geological formation imaginable: Martian permafrost, asteroid rock, even the ice sheets of Europa during the prototype testing phase. But the signature I was seeing on my monitors didn't match any known geological structure. It was as if the drill was encountering something that wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite hollow. A sudden spike in the seismic sensors caught my attention. The borehole seismograph showed a sharp discontinuity, followed by what looked like nothing. The drill's descent rate increased dramatically, as if it had broken through into empty space. "Emergency log entry," I said, my voice tight with concern. "Drill has encountered a void at 28.9 meters depth. Repeat, we've broken through into what appears to be a cavern or empty space beneath the regolith. Stopping drilling operations immediately." The drill rig automatically ceased operation as the safety protocols engaged. I could see the drill string hanging loose in the borehole, the bit dangling freely in whatever space lay beneath the lunar surface. My mind raced through the possibilities. Lava tubes were known to exist on the moon, but our ground-penetrating radar should have detected any large voids before we began drilling. The surveys had shown solid rock at this depth, not empty space. I activated the borehole camera, lowering it carefully down the drill string. The feed showed nothing but darkness at first, then gradually adjusted to reveal a vast cavern extending far beyond the range of the camera's lights. The walls were smooth, almost glassy, unlike any natural geological formation I'd ever seen. And there was something else, structures that looked almost artificial. My breath caught in my throat. The camera feed showed what appeared to be geometric patterns on the cavern walls, regular shapes that nature simply didn't create. I zoomed in on one section, my hands trembling slightly as I manipulated the controls. There was no mistaking it. The walls were covered with markings that looked like some form of writing or symbolic representation. "This is impossible," I whispered, then remembered I was still recording. Log entry continuation. The void appears to be artificial in nature. There are structures, markings on the walls that suggest this is not a natural formation. I need to contact Mission Control immediately. But as I reached for the communication switch, the seismic sensors erupted with activity. Not the random noise of settling regolith or thermal expansion, but a rhythmic pattern that sent chills down my spine. It was a steady beat, like a massive heart pulsing in the depths of the moon. The sound transmitted through the drill string was unmistakable, a regular, methodical thumping that seemed to be coming from deep within the cavern. I checked the frequency analysis, my engineering mind trying to make sense of the impossible data. The rhythm was too regular to be natural, too purposeful to be random. And then I recognized the pattern. The frequency matched exactly the rotation rate of our drill bit at the moment it broke through, the same RPM that had been spinning when we penetrated the cavern. Something down there was responding to our intrusion, mimicking the sound of our drilling with mechanical precision. I sat frozen at my console, listening to the impossible heartbeat emanating from beneath the lunar surface. The regular thumping continued, growing gradually louder with each passing minute. Whatever lay hidden in the depths of the moon was awake now, and it knew we were here. The isolation that had felt oppressive moments before now seemed like a blessing. Whatever was making that sound, whatever had created those structures in the cavern, I was the only human being who knew about it. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on me like the gravity of 1,000 worlds. I stared at the seismic readouts, watching the rhythmic pulses grow stronger. The sound was getting closer to the surface, climbing steadily up through the regolith toward the base, toward me. The heartbeat of the moon was coming to meet its discoverer. Chapter 2: The Discovery. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity and growing dread. I knew I should contact Mission Control, should report the discovery through proper channels, but something held me back. What if they ordered an immediate evacuation? What if they decided to seal the borehole and abandon the site? The scientist in me rebelled at the thought of walking away from the most significant discovery in human history. Instead, I found myself running every diagnostic available, trying to make sense of what lay beneath our base. The seismic sensors continued their rhythmic pulsing, growing stronger with each passing hour. By 05:00, the vibrations were strong enough to register on the surface seismographs, creating a steady drumbeat that seemed to echo through the very foundations of our lunar outpost. I pulled up the geological survey data again, cross-referencing it with the new information. Our ground-penetrating radar had shown dense basaltic rock at this depth, the kind of solid foundation we'd chosen this site for. But now I realized the radar signature could have been misinterpreted. What if the dense material wasn't natural rock, but something else entirely? Something designed to appear solid to our scanning equipment. The borehole camera revealed more details as I carefully maneuvered it through the cavern. The walls were indeed covered with geometric patterns, but they weren't just decorative. The markings seemed to form a complex system of symbols, almost like a technical schematic or architectural plan. Some of the patterns glowed faintly, emitting a soft blue light that pulsed in time with the seismic heartbeat. I zoomed in on one of the glowing sections, adjusting the camera's focus. The symbols were incredibly precise, etched into what looked like a metallic surface beneath a thin layer of lunar dust. The craftsmanship was beyond anything human technology could achieve. The lines were perfect, the curves mathematically precise. This wasn't just alien technology, it was artistry on a scale that defied comprehension. My recorder captured everything as I documented the discovery. The cavern appears to be approximately circular, roughly 50 meters in diameter based on camera positioning. The walls are covered with what I can only describe as technical diagrams or symbolic representations. Some sections emit low-level electromagnetic radiation in the blue spectrum. The entire structure appears to be artificial, though its age is impossible to determine without direct sampling. The seismic activity suddenly intensified, the rhythmic beating growing louder and more insistent. I checked the monitors and saw that the source was moving closer to the surface. Whatever was making that sound was ascending through the lunar crust directly toward our base. The rate of ascent was steady, about 2 meters per hour, as if something massive was slowly climbing toward the surface. I should have been terrified, but instead I felt an odd sense of anticipation. This was why I'd become an engineer, why I'd dedicated my life to exploring the unknown. Every calculation, every safety protocol, every moment of training had prepared me for this discovery. I was about to become the first human being to witness direct evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence. The question was whether I would survive the encounter. I began analyzing the seismic patterns more carefully, trying to understand what was approaching. The frequency signature was unlike anything in our databases. It wasn't natural tectonic activity, nor was it consistent with any known geological process. The regularity was mechanical, purposeful, but the harmonics suggested something organic, a fusion of technology and biology that challenged my understanding of both. The ascent rate suddenly doubled, and I realized with growing alarm that whatever was coming would reach the surface within the next 2 hours. I needed to make a decision: evacuate immediately and potentially lose the greatest discovery in human history, or stay and risk everything for the chance to communicate with an alien intelligence. My finger hovered over the emergency communication switch. One call to mission control and this would become an international incident. NASA would send a recovery team, probably military, and the site would be locked down within days. The scientific opportunity of a lifetime would be lost to bureaucracy and security protocols. But the alternative was almost certainly suicide. Whatever lay beneath the moon had been dormant for who knew how long. Our drilling had awakened it, and now it was coming to investigate the disturbance. I was alone, unarmed, and completely unprepared for first contact. The seismic sensors shuddered with each beat of the approaching entity. The sound had grown loud enough to hear through the base's structure, a deep thrumming that made my teeth ache. The lights flickered as the vibrations affected the power systems, and I could hear the metallic groaning of stressed components throughout the habitat. I made my choice. Instead of calling for evacuation, I began preparing the base for whatever was coming. I activated all the recording equipment, set every sensor to maximum sensitivity, and established a continuous data stream to the orbital relay satellites. Even if I didn't survive, the information would reach Earth eventually. Humanity would know what I'd discovered. The heartbeat was directly beneath the base now, shaking the foundations with each pulse. Dust particles danced in the air as the entire structure resonated with the alien rhythm. The drilling rig swayed gently, and I could hear the cables humming with transmitted vibrations. Then suddenly, everything stopped. The silence was deafening, more terrifying than the previous cacophony. I held my breath, listening for any sign of movement, any indication of what might be happening beneath the surface. The monitors showed no seismic activity, no electromagnetic signatures, nothing to indicate that anything unusual was occurring. For 15 minutes, nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. The lunar base held its breath along with me, waiting for whatever came next. Then the floor began to change. I noticed it first as a subtle difference in the lighting, a soft blue glow emanating from the metal deck plates beneath my feet. The glow intensified, spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns that matched the symbols I'd seen in the cavern below. The entire floor of the control module was becoming a map, a blueprint of something vast and complex. The metallic surface rippled like water, and I realized with growing wonder that the floor was no longer solid metal, but some kind of transparent material revealing the lunar regolith beneath. And there, moving slowly upward through the dust and rock, was a shape that defied description. It wasn't a machine, though it had mechanical components. It wasn't alive, though it pulsed with organic rhythm. It was something in between, something that existed in the liminal space between technology and biology. The entity rose smoothly through the regolith as if the dense lunar soil were no more substantial than air, its form shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The creature, I could only think of it as a creature, was roughly spherical, about 3 meters in diameter, but its surface was in constant motion. Metallic tendrils extended and retracted, geometric patterns flowed across its skin, and the blue glow I'd observed in the cavern pulsed from within its translucent body. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. I stood frozen as the entity reached the level of the base floor, its upper surface breaking through the transparent material like a whale breaching the ocean surface. The creature rotated slowly, its surface rippling with what might have been curiosity or recognition. I realized with growing amazement that it was studying me as intently as I was studying it. The entity's surface suddenly became mirror-like, reflecting my own image back at me. But the reflection was wrong. It showed me not as I was, but as I might have been after years of lunar exposure, my skin pale and translucent, my eyes adapted to the harsh lighting conditions. It was showing me my future, or perhaps my potential. Then the communication began. It wasn't words, not exactly. The entity projected thoughts directly into my mind, concepts and images that bypassed language entirely. I saw the moon as it had been millions of years ago, teeming with a civilization that had chosen to retreat beneath the surface rather than abandon their home. I saw the construction of vast underground cities, the engineering of creatures like the one before me, biomechanical guardians designed to maintain the lunar infrastructure during the long sleep of their creators. The heartbeat I detected wasn't a sign of life in the traditional sense. It was the sound of the moon itself, the rhythmic pulse of systems that had maintained the underground cities for eons. Our drilling had disrupted that rhythm, awakening one of the guardians to investigate the disturbance. The entity showed me more, the true extent of what lay beneath the lunar surface. The cavern I'd discovered was just the tip of an iceberg, a vast network of tunnels and chambers extending hundreds of kilometers in every direction. The lunar interior was honeycombed with structures, a subterranean civilization that had chosen hibernation over extinction when the surface became uninhabitable. And now, after millions of years of silence, humanity had awakened them. The Guardian's communication shifted, becoming more urgent. It showed me images of Earth, of the growing human presence in space, of the lunar base construction that had unknowingly threatened the ancient slumber of the moon's original inhabitants. The entity wasn't just curious, it was concerned. I realized with growing understanding that I was witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented in human history. Not just first contact, but the discovery of an entire civilization that had been hiding beneath our feet for longer than humans had existed as a species. The Guardian's final message was clear. The lunar inhabitants would not remain hidden forever. Our presence on the moon had triggered ancient protocols, awakening systems that had been dormant since before the dawn of human civilization. The heartbeat I detected was just the beginning. As the first light of lunar dawn touched the windows of the base, the Guardian began to descend, its form flowing back into the transparent floor. The blue glow faded, the geometric patterns dissolved, and the metal deck plates returned to their normal state. Within minutes, there was no sign that anything unusual had occurred. But I knew the truth. The moon was alive, not with the simple pulse of geological activity, but with the complex rhythms of an ancient civilization, and they knew we were here. I sat at my console as the shift change approached, my mind reeling from the experience. The seismic sensors had gone quiet, the drilling rig sat undisturbed, and the monitors showed nothing out of the ordinary. But I carried the weight of the greatest secret in human history. The moon wasn't empty. It was full of dreams, full of memories, full of beings who had chosen to wait rather than die. And now, after millions of years of patient slumber, they were waking up to find that they were no longer alone. I looked out at the lunar landscape with new eyes. Every crater, every mountain, every plain of regolith concealed secrets beyond imagination. The moon wasn't just a rock orbiting Earth. It was a world with its own history, its own inhabitants, its own destiny. And that destiny was now intertwined with humanity's. The chronometer showed 0600. In 30 minutes, the day shift would arrive, and I would have to decide what to tell them. The easy choice would be to report a minor drilling anomaly, to keep the discovery to myself, and let the powers on Earth decide how to handle first contact. But as I listened to the silence of the base, broken only by the whisper of life support systems, I knew I couldn't do that. Humanity deserved to know what lay beneath the lunar surface. We deserved to meet our neighbors. I activated my recorder one final time. Personal log, Dr. Ira Stone, final entry of night shift. I have made contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence of unknown origin. The entity appears to be a biomechanical guardian of an ancient lunar civilization that exists beneath the moon's surface. I am transmitting all recorded data to Mission Control with recommendation for immediate diplomatic contact protocols. I paused, looking out at the stars that were fading in the lunar dawn. They've been waiting for us for a very long time. It's time we introduced ourselves properly. The data transmission would take 1.3 seconds to reach Earth, but the implications would echo through human history forever. We were not alone in the universe. We had simply been looking in the wrong direction. Our neighbors weren't among the distant stars. They were right beneath our feet, waiting patiently in the depths of the moon. And now, at last, the long sleep was ending. The heartbeat of the moon was growing stronger, spreading throughout the ancient underground cities as more guardians awakened. The time of hiding was over. The age of lunar revelation had begun. Chapter 3: The Awakening. The day shift arrived exactly on schedule, their excited chatter about the routine progress of construction projects cutting through the heavy silence that had settled over the base. I watched them enter with a mixture of envy and concern. They had no idea that their world had just fundamentally changed. While they'd slept, the moon had come alive beneath us. Captain Elias North was the first to notice my agitation. "Alina, you look like you've seen a ghost. Everything all right with the night shift?" I hesitated, my hand hovering over the data pad that contained the seismic recordings and video footage. How do you tell someone that their workplace is sitting directly above an alien civilization? How do you explain that the moon they've walked on for months is actually a hollow world teeming with ancient life? "We need to talk," I said simply. "All of us, conference room now." The 15-person day shift gathered quickly, their expressions shifting from curiosity to concern as they noticed my serious demeanor. I connected my data pad to the main display, pulling up the seismic readings from the previous night. The rhythmic pattern was unmistakable, a steady heartbeat that had grown stronger over the hours I'd spent alone in the control module. Last night at approximately 03:00, our drilling operation broke through into a void beneath the regolith, I began, my voice steady despite the chaos of thoughts racing through my mind. What we found wasn't a natural lava tube or geological formation. It was artificial. I showed them the video footage from the borehole camera, the geometric patterns on the cavern walls, the blue glow of the alien symbols. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Lily Zhang, our exobiologist, leaned forward with an expression of pure wonder. "These patterns," she said, pointing at the screen, "they're not random. Look at the mathematical precision, the consistent spacing. This is definitely a form of communication or technical notation." "There's more," I continued, switching to the seismic data. "After the breakthrough, we started detecting regular pulses from deep within the lunar crust. Whatever created that cavern is alive, or at least active, and it's moving toward the surface." Captain Elias North's military training kicked in immediately. "Are we in danger? Should we evacuate?" "I don't think so," I said carefully. "I had direct contact with one of the entities. It was peaceful, curious. It showed me things, communicated through some form of telepathic projection. The beings beneath the moon have been dormant for millions of years. Our construction activity woke them up." The room erupted in excited conversation, everyone talking at once. Some were terrified, others thrilled by the scientific implications. Dr. Ethan Gray, our chief geologist, was already pulling up his own data sets, cross-referencing my findings with the geological surveys we'd conducted before construction began. "It makes sense now," he said, his voice filled with awe. "All those anomalies in the subsurface readings, the density variations we couldn't explain. We've been building on top of an entire civilization." I showed them the rest of the data, the communication logs, the video footage of the Guardian entity, the maps of the underground network it had shown me. The room fell silent again as the full scope of the discovery became clear. "We need to contact Earth immediately," Chen said, but I shook my head. "I've already transmitted the data. Mission Control received it 20 minutes ago. By now, every major space agency on Earth knows what we've found. The question is what we do next." The seismic monitors suddenly erupted with activity. Not the single heartbeat from before, but a complex symphony of rhythms and pulses. The entire moon seemed to be coming alive beneath us. The Guardian I'd encountered wasn't alone. It was just the first of many. "Look at this," Sarah whispered, pointing at the seismic display. "The patterns are spreading. Whatever's happening beneath us, it's not localized to our drilling site. It's global." She was right. The seismic network was detecting activity at sites across the lunar near side, all showing the same rhythmic patterns. The awakening wasn't just happening beneath our base. It was happening everywhere humans had established a presence on the moon. The communication console chimed, and Captain Elias North moved to answer it. The face that appeared on the screen was unfamiliar. A woman in civilian clothes with the harried expression of someone dealing with an unprecedented crisis. "Lunar Base Alpha, this is Dr. Sophia Beck, Director of Lunar Operations. We've received your data transmission and have been in emergency session with the United Nations Security Council for the past hour. How certain are you of your findings?" "Absolutely certain," I said, stepping into view of the camera. "I've had direct contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. The moon contains an entire civilization that has been dormant for millions of years. Our activities have awakened them." Dr. Reynolds nodded grimly. "That's consistent with what we're seeing from the other lunar installations. Every base on the moon is reporting similar seismic activity. The Chinese base at Shackleton Crater, the European facility in Mare Tranquillitatis, even the private installations. Whatever you've discovered, it's happening everywhere." The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about our base or our drilling operation. The lunar inhabitants were awakening globally, responding to the cumulative presence of human activity across the moon's surface. We hadn't just stumbled upon a single hidden outpost, we triggered a planetary awakening. "What's the official response?" Captain Elias North asked. "We're still debating that," Reynolds admitted. "The president has been briefed along with other world leaders. The UN is calling an emergency session, but we need to know more about what we're dealing with. Dr. Vasquez, you mentioned direct communication. Can you establish contact again?" I looked around the room at my colleagues, seeing my own mixture of fear and excitement reflected in their faces. The Guardian had been peaceful during our first encounter, but would that change now that the entire lunar civilization was awakening? And what would happen when they realized how many humans had invaded their world? "I can try," I said finally, "but I need to go back to the drilling site. The entity emerged from the same location where we broke through. If they're going to communicate again, that's where it will happen." "Negative," Reynolds said immediately. "It's too dangerous. We need you to maintain a safe distance and continue monitoring from the control room." But I was already moving toward the airlock, pulling on my environmental suit. "With respect, Dr. Reynolds, we've already made contact. They know we're here. Hiding in the base isn't going to make us any safer. The only chance we have is to show them that we're peaceful, that we want to communicate." Sarah stood up, followed by Marcus. "We're going with you," Sarah said firmly. "If these beings are truly telepathic, they might respond better to a group, and Marcus can analyze any geological changes in real time." Captain Elias North looked torn between his duty to maintain safety and the scientific opportunity of a lifetime. Finally, he nodded. "Take portable communication equipment and keep an open channel. At the first sign of danger, you evacuate immediately." We suited up quickly, the familiar routine of donning our environmental gear providing a strange sense of normalcy in the midst of the most abnormal situation imaginable. The three of us moved through the airlock and out onto the lunar surface, our boots sending up small puffs of regolith dust as we walked toward the drilling site. The landscape looked different now. The harsh shadows and stark beauty I'd grown accustomed to during my months on the moon now seemed to conceal secrets in every crater and crevice. How many Guardians watched us from beneath the surface? How many of their cities lay hidden in the depths? The drilling rig stood exactly as we'd left it, but the borehole was different. The opening now glowed with the same blue light I'd seen in the cavern below, and the air around us crackled with electromagnetic energy. The seismic sensors had gone quiet again, but this silence felt different, expectant, like the pause before a musical performance begins. "I'm not detecting any hostile activity," Marcus reported, studying his portable scanner. "But the regolith composition has changed. The metallic content is much higher than normal, as if something is altering the chemical structure of the soil." Sarah moved closer to the borehole, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "The electromagnetic field is incredible. It's like standing next to a massive electrical generator, but there's no heat signature. Whatever technology they're using, it's incredibly efficient." I approached the edge of the borehole, peering down into the blue-lit depths. The Guardian was there, waiting for us. But it wasn't alone. Dozens of similar entities floated in the space below, their forms varying in size and complexity. Some were small, no larger than my fist, while others were massive, filling the entire diameter of the cavern. The first Guardian rose to meet us, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed to welcome our presence. The communication began immediately, more complex and detailed than our initial contact. This time, I wasn't just seeing images, I was experiencing memories. The lunar civilization had been ancient when dinosaurs still walked the Earth. They had evolved on the moon when it possessed a thick atmosphere and liquid water, a time when the young moon was a garden world orbiting its parent planet. But as the atmosphere thinned and the surface became hostile, they had made a choice. Rather than flee to other worlds, they had turned inward, engineering their entire civilization to exist in the stable environment beneath the surface. The Guardians were their solution to the problem of maintaining their underground cities during the long sleep. These biomechanical entities could survive the vacuum and radiation of space while performing the necessary maintenance and monitoring tasks that kept the lunar infrastructure intact. They were the caretakers of a sleeping world, the shepherds of a civilization that had chosen to wait for the universe to change. But our arrival had changed everything. The lunar inhabitants had known about Earth, had watched the evolution of life on our planet with scientific interest. They had even intervened occasionally, seeding Earth with the basic building blocks of life, guiding evolution toward intelligence. We weren't just neighbors, we were their children, their experiment, their hope for the future. The revelation was overwhelming. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe because we had been created by the very beings who now slumbered beneath the lunar surface. Every major religion, every ancient myth about visitors from the sky, every story of gods and angels had been influenced by the subtle interventions of the lunar civilization. And now we had awakened our creators. The Guardians showed us more. The true extent of the underground network, the technology that had allowed an entire civilization to survive for millions of years in suspended animation, the plans they had made for the eventual awakening. They hadn't abandoned the surface entirely. They had simply been waiting for the right time to return. That time was now. The electromagnetic field around us intensified, and I realized with growing amazement that the entire lunar surface was beginning to change. The regolith itself was becoming something different, transforming from loose dust into a more structured material. The Guardians were preparing the surface for the return of their creators, engineering the environment to support life once again. Sarah was recording everything, her scientific instruments capturing data that would revolutionize our understanding of planetary engineering. Marcus was analyzing the geological changes, his face pale, with the realization that we were witnessing the beginning of a massive terraforming project. The communication from the Guardians became more urgent. They wanted us to understand the choice we faced. The lunar civilization was awakening, and they wanted to meet their children, to guide humanity into a new age of technological and spiritual development. But first contact would require trust, understanding, and a willingness to accept that humanity was not the pinnacle of creation. We were part of something much larger. The Guardian before us began to change, its surface flowing and reshaping into something more humanoid. It was trying to communicate in a form we could better understand, bridging the gap between our species with a shape that reflected both our nature and theirs. The entity that stood before us was beautiful beyond description, a fusion of organic curves and mechanical precision, of biological warmth and technological perfection. It extended one appendage toward me, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was the moment that would define the future of both our species. I reached out, my gloved hand meeting the Guardian's outstretched limb. The contact sent a shock of recognition through me, a sense of coming home that I had never experienced before. The Guardian's thoughts flowed into my mind, not as words or images, but as pure understanding. The age of human isolation was over. The age of lunar revelation had begun. Chapter 4: Revelation. The contact lasted only a few seconds, but in that brief moment, I experienced more than my mind could fully process. The Guardian's touch transmitted not just thoughts, but emotions, memories, and a sense of perspective that fundamentally altered my understanding of reality. When our hands finally separated, I stood trembling on the lunar surface, my worldview shattered and rebuilt in the span of a heartbeat. Sarah and Marcus stared at me with expressions of concern and wonder, their own instruments recording the electromagnetic surge that had passed between the Guardian and myself. The entity had retreated slightly, its form shifting back to the spherical shape I'd first encountered. But now I could see the subtle signs of communication rippling across its surface. "Elena," Sarah's voice crackled in my helmet speakers. "What happened? What did you see?" I struggled to find words that could encompass the experience. How do you describe the sensation of touching a mind that has existed for millions of years? How do you explain the feeling of connecting with a being that has watched over humanity since our earliest ancestors first looked up at the stars? "They're not just our neighbors," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "They're our ancestors, our creators. They've been guiding human evolution for millennia." The Guardian seemed to approve of my revelation, its surface pulsing with gentle patterns of blue and gold light. Around us, the other entities in the borehole began to rise, floating up through the transparent regolith to join their companion. Soon we were surrounded by dozens of the biomechanical beings, their varied forms creating a silent audience to our historic encounter. Marcus lowered his scanner, his face pale with the magnitude of our discovery. "The geological readings are incredible. The entire subsurface structure is artificial. The moon isn't just hollow, it's engineered. Every lava tube, every cavern, every geological formation we've studied has been modified, enhanced, incorporated into their infrastructure." Sarah was recording frantically, her scientific instruments capturing data that would reshape every field of human knowledge. "The electromagnetic fields are creating localized gravity wells. They're actually altering the fundamental forces in controlled areas. The technology required for this kind of large-scale manipulation is beyond anything we can imagine." The lead guardian, my guardian, as I'd begun to think of it, moved closer again, and I felt its presence in my mind like a warm pressure. It was trying to communicate something more, something urgent. The images it projected showed the underground cities in greater detail, revealing the true scope of the lunar civilization. They hadn't just survived beneath the surface, they had thrived. While humanity had struggled through our primitive history, the lunar inhabitants had continued their technological and spiritual evolution in the protected environment of their underground world. They had solved problems we hadn't even discovered yet, achieved levels of understanding that made our greatest scientific breakthroughs seem like children's discoveries. But they had also faced challenges. The decision to retreat underground had come at a great cost. Many of their people had chosen to leave the moon entirely, spreading throughout the solar system and beyond. Those who remained had made a conscious choice to wait, to preserve their way of life until the universe was ready for their return. Now, with humanity's arrival on the lunar surface, that long wait was ending. The Guardian showed me scenes from Earth's history, moments when the lunar inhabitants had subtly intervened in human development. The sudden leaps in technological understanding that had puzzled historians, the inexplicable discoveries that had accelerated our scientific progress, the religious experiences that had shaped our spiritual beliefs, all had been gentle nudges from our hidden benefactors. But their intervention had always been limited, careful not to overwhelm our developing civilization with knowledge we weren't ready to handle. They had been waiting for us to reach a certain level of maturity, a point where we could accept the truth about our origins without destroying ourselves in the process. The Guardian's communication became more complex, showing me the network of connections between the lunar civilization and humanity. Every major culture on Earth had stories of beings from the sky, of gods who had created humanity and guided our development. These weren't just myths. They were distorted memories of real encounters, filtered through the limited understanding of our ancestors. The implications were staggering. Human history wasn't just our story. It was part of a much larger narrative that spanned millions of years and multiple worlds. We were the latest chapter in a saga that had begun long before our species existed, and now we were about to meet the authors of that story. The Guardian's final message was both a warning and a promise. The awakening of the lunar civilization would change everything. Their technology could solve all of humanity's problems: disease, poverty, environmental destruction, even death itself. But it would also challenge every belief system, every social structure, every assumption about our place in the universe. The age of human innocence was ending. I turned back to my colleagues, seeing my own mixture of awe and apprehension reflected in their faces. "They're offering us a choice," I explained. "We can continue our development on our own terms, with only limited contact and assistance, or we can embrace our heritage, accept their guidance, and join them in a new age of interspecies cooperation." "What happens if we choose isolation?" Sarah asked. The Guardian answered directly, projecting images of humanity continuing its current path. "We would eventually solve our problems, reach the stars on our own terms, but it would take centuries longer and cost countless lives. The lunar inhabitants would respect our choice, continuing their slow awakening and limited contact, but the full benefits of their technology and knowledge would remain unavailable. And if we accept their help?" The images shifted, showing a transformed Earth. Disease eliminated, environmental damage reversed, space travel revolutionized. Humanity would leap forward centuries in a matter of decades, but the transformation would be profound and irreversible. Our civilization would become something new, something that had never existed before, a fusion of human creativity and lunar wisdom. The choice wasn't just about technology or progress. It was about identity. Were we ready to accept that we were part of something larger? Could we embrace our role as the children of an ancient civilization without losing our sense of self? The Guardians waited patiently, their forms pulsing with gentle light. They had waited millions of years for this moment. They could wait a little longer for our decision. But time was running short. The awakening process had already begun, and soon the lunar inhabitants would emerge from their long slumber. The question wasn't whether we would meet our creators, it was how we would greet them. I looked up at the Earth, hanging like a blue jewel in the black sky. Somewhere on that distant world, politicians and scientists were debating our response, trying to process the impossible knowledge that humanity was not alone and never had been. But the real decision wouldn't be made in boardrooms or government offices. It would be made here, on the lunar surface, by the people who had actually made contact. I reached out to the Guardian again, establishing the mental connection that had already changed me so profoundly. This time, I initiated the communication, asking the questions that would determine the future of both our species. Could we meet them directly? Could we see their cities, learn from their wisdom, understand their culture? Most importantly, could we forge a partnership that respected both our heritage and our independence? The Guardian's response was immediate and overwhelming. Not only could we meet them, we were invited to witness their awakening, to be present for the most significant moment in their million-year history. The lunar inhabitants wanted their children to be there when they emerged from their long sleep. But there was one condition. The knowledge we would gain, the truths we would learn, would change us forever. Once we saw what lay beneath the moon's surface, once we understood our true place in the cosmic hierarchy, there would be no going back to our previous innocence. The choice was ours to make. I looked at Sarah and Marcus, seeing the same realization in their eyes. We were standing at the threshold of the greatest moment in human history. Behind us lay everything we had ever known, our beliefs, our assumptions, our understanding of our place in the universe. Before us lay the unknown, terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The Guardian extended its appendage again, offering the same connection that had begun this incredible journey. This time, it wasn't just offering communication, it was offering transformation. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of destiny settling on my shoulders. Humanity had spent millennia looking up at the stars, wondering if we were alone in the universe. Now we knew the truth. We had never been alone. Our creators had been waiting for us all along. And now, at last, the meeting that had been millions of years in the making was about to begin. I reached out and took the Guardian's hand, accepting the invitation that would change everything. The blue light surrounded us, and I felt the familiar sensation of connection, of understanding, of coming home. The age of revelation had begun. Chapter 5, First Contact. The transformation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The moment I accepted the Guardian's invitation, reality seemed to shift around me. The harsh lunar landscape dissolved, replaced by a vision of what lay beneath the surface. I was no longer standing on the regolith. I was floating in a vast cavern that extended far beyond the limits of human perception. The underground city spread before me like a dream made manifest. Crystalline spires reached toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into misty distance. Rivers of liquid light flowed through channels carved into the living rock. Buildings that seemed to be grown rather than constructed rose in organic curves that defied conventional architecture. And everywhere, I saw the inhabitants of this hidden world. They were beautiful beyond description. Not human, but not alien in the way I'd expected. They had the same basic form as us, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but their features were more refined, more graceful. Their skin seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways, creating halos of color that shifted with their movements. Some had wings of pure energy, others moved through the air as naturally as walking. But it was their eyes that struck me most deeply. They looked at me with an expression I could only describe as parental love, the recognition of a parent seeing their child after a long separation. These were our creators, our benefactors, the beings who had guided humanity from our earliest primitive ancestors to the spacefaring civilization we had become. The vision shifted, showing me the history of their civilization. They had evolved on the moon during a time when it was a paradise world, with oceans and forests and skies that blazed with color. They had developed technology that allowed them to manipulate matter and energy at the most fundamental levels, to shape reality according to their will. But they had also developed wisdom. When they realized that their world was changing, that the atmosphere was thinning and the surface becoming hostile, they had made a choice that reflected their advanced understanding of existence. Rather than flee to other worlds or attempt to preserve their surface environment, they had chosen to turn inward, to create a new world beneath the surface. The transformation had taken centuries. They had engineered their own evolution, adapting their bodies to the underground environment while preserving their essential nature. They had created the Guardians, the biomechanical beings that maintained their cities during the long sleep, and they had established protocols for their eventual awakening. The protocols were complex, designed to ensure that their return would be beneficial for both themselves and any other intelligent species that might evolve in their absence. They had seeded Earth with the basic requirements for life, guided the development of intelligence, and established safeguards to prevent premature contact. Now, with humanity's arrival on the lunar surface, the final protocol had been triggered. The time of awakening had come. The vision shifted again, showing me the present moment from their perspective. They had been aware of our bases, our rovers, our scientific instruments. They had watched us struggle with the challenges of lunar exploration, had seen our determination and our curiosity, and they had recognized in us the same spirit that had driven their own ancestors to greatness. But they had also seen our flaws, our violence, our greed, our short-sightedness. These were not insurmountable problems, but they were concerns. The lunar inhabitants had waited millions of years for this moment. They wanted to ensure that their return would be a blessing, not a curse. The Guardian's voice echoed in my mind, though voice was too simple a word for the complex communication we shared. It showed me the choice we faced, not just as individuals but as a species. We could accept their guidance and become part of their extended family, or we could choose our own path and develop independently. Both choices had merit, both choices had risks. The vision began to fade, and I found myself back on the lunar surface, still holding the Guardian's appendage. Sarah and Marcus were watching me with expressions of concern and wonder, and I realized that only moments had passed in the outside world. The vision had been a gift, a way of sharing knowledge that would have taken hours to communicate through words. "They want to meet us," I said simply. "All of us. They're ready to emerge from their long sleep." The Guardian released my hand and began to change, its form flowing and reshaping into something more humanoid. Around us, the other entities were undergoing similar transformations, adapting their appearance to facilitate easier communication. The ground beneath our feet began to vibrate with a different rhythm, not the threatening heartbeat of before, but a gentle pulsing that felt almost like breathing. The lunar surface was changing, preparing to welcome its true inhabitants back into the light. Sarah was recording everything, her instruments capturing data that would revolutionize multiple scientific fields. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts," she reported. "But they're not dangerous. It's like the entire moon is becoming a massive communication device, a bridge between their world and ours." Marcus knelt down, running his gloved hand through the regolith. "The soil composition is changing. Metallic elements are organizing themselves into crystalline structures. They're literally transforming the lunar surface to support their return." I looked up at the Earth, knowing that billions of people were going about their daily lives with no idea that everything was about to change. The news would spread quickly once the lunar inhabitants emerged, but for now, this moment belonged to the few of us who had been chosen to witness the beginning of a new age. The Guardian who had first contacted me stepped forward, its humanoid form both familiar and alien. It extended its hand again, but this time the gesture was different. It wasn't offering communication or transformation, it was offering partnership. I took the offered hand and immediately felt the connection deepen. The Guardian was sharing its own memories, its own experiences during the long vigil. I saw the moon through its senses, felt the passage of time in a way that no human had ever experienced. Millions of years of patient waiting, of careful maintenance, of hopeful anticipation. And now, at last, the waiting was over. The Guardian's thoughts flowed into me, showing me the immediate future. The emergence would begin at the next lunar dawn, when the temperature difference between the surface and the underground cities was greatest. The lunar inhabitants would rise from their hidden world in a carefully orchestrated ceremony that would mark the beginning of a new era. They wanted us to be there, to witness their return, to share in the joy of reunion. But they also wanted us to understand the responsibility that came with this knowledge. We would be the ambassadors between two worlds, the bridge between the species that had created us and the civilization we had built in their absence. The communication ended, but the connection remained. The Guardian released my hand but stayed close, its presence a constant reminder of the bond we had forged. Around us, the other entities began to move, flowing back into the borehole to prepare for the awakening. Sarah and Marcus looked at me with expressions that reflected my own mixture of excitement and apprehension. We had been chosen for this moment, selected by fate or design to witness the beginning of everything. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. But there was also joy. The lunar inhabitants weren't just our creators, they were our family. They had watched over us for millennia, had guided our development with love and patience. Now, at last, we would meet them face to face. The chronometer on my suit showed that we had been outside for over an hour. Soon the day shift would be ending, and the next group of colonists would arrive to begin their work. But their work would be different now. Instead of building a human outpost on an empty world, they would be preparing to welcome the true inhabitants home. I looked at the Guardian, seeing my own reflection in its mirror-like surface. I had been changed by the contact, marked in ways that went beyond the physical. The knowledge I carried would transform me forever, but it was a transformation I welcomed. The age of human isolation was truly over. The age of cosmic family had begun. Chapter 6: The Emergence. The lunar dawn arrived with a beauty that seemed almost supernatural. As the sun's first rays touched the lunar surface, the regolith began to glow with a soft luminescence that had nothing to do with reflected sunlight. The electromagnetic field that the Guardians had generated reached its peak intensity, creating aurora-like effects that danced across the black starry sky. We had returned to the base to brief the rest of the crew, but everyone had gathered outside again for the emergence. The entire complement of Lunar Base Alpha, 53 souls in total, stood in silent witness as the moon prepared to reveal its greatest secret. Even Dr. Reynolds and the other officials on Earth had fallen silent, their communication limited to whispered requests for updates as they watched the impossible data streaming from our instruments. The ground beneath our feet had become transparent again, revealing the vast network of caverns and tunnels that extended far beyond our initial discovery. The underground city was awakening, its crystalline spires beginning to glow with the same blue light we had observed in the Guardian entities. And moving through those glowing structures were the inhabitants themselves, their graceful forms gathering in what appeared to be ceremonial formations. The Guardian who had become my constant companion stood beside me, its humanoid form a silent promise of the contact to come. The mental connection we had established remained strong, allowing me to sense the anticipation and joy that filled the underground city. After millions of years of waiting, the lunar inhabitants were about to reclaim their birthright. The electromagnetic field suddenly intensified, and I felt rather than heard the first sign of emergence. The lunar surface began to change, the transparent regolith flowing like liquid as the ancient mechanisms beneath prepared to open. The process was gentle but inexorable, the moon itself reshaping to accommodate the return of its true owners. Sarah's voice was filled with scientific wonder. The geological transformation is incredible. They're not just opening doors, they're restructuring the entire surface layer. The moon is becoming a different world. Marcus nodded, his instruments recording data that would keep geologists busy for centuries. The metallic elements in the regolith are organizing themselves into support structures. They're literally growing a new surface that can support both their civilization and our bases. The first emergence point formed directly in front of us, the regolith flowing upward like a reverse waterfall to create a circular opening. The edges crystallized into a perfect ring of blue glowing material, and through the opening we could see the upper levels of the underground city. The lunar inhabitants began to rise. They came in groups of 7, their forms more beautiful in person than they had appeared in the vision. Their skin seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways, creating halos of color that shifted with their movements. Some floated effortlessly through the air, while others walked with a grace that made our own movements seem clumsy by comparison. The first group to emerge moved toward us with obvious intent. Their leader was taller than the others, with features that seemed almost familiar despite their alien nature. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in our minds rather than through the air. "Children of Earth," she said, and the term was filled with warmth and affection rather than condescension. "We have waited long for this moment. We have watched your growth with pride and anticipation. Now, at last, we can meet face to face." The communication was effortless, bypassing language barriers to convey meaning directly. I could sense the others reacting to her words, feeling the same mixture of awe and recognition that had overwhelmed me during my first contact. "You know who we are," I said, stepping forward to serve as spokesperson for humanity. "You know what we are." "We know," she confirmed. "We have always known. From the moment your ancestors first stood upright and looked at the stars with wonder, we have known this day would come. You are not our experiments or our property. You are our greatest achievement, our legacy to the universe." More emergence points were opening across the lunar surface, each one revealing another section of the underground city. The lunar inhabitants were rising in their thousands, their graceful forms filling the landscape with beauty and light. The guardians moved among them, their biomechanical forms complementing the organic grace of their creators. "Why did you hide?" Sarah asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her awe. "Why retreat underground when you could have remained on the surface?" The leader's expression grew thoughtful. It was not hiding but waiting. The surface of our world was changing, becoming hostile to our form of life. We could have fought against the changes, could have used our technology to preserve the environment. But we chose a different path. We chose transformation rather than preservation, growth rather than stagnation. She gestured at the underground city visible through the emergence point. The underground world offered us stability and security, but it also offered us the opportunity to evolve in new directions. We became something different, something that could survive and thrive in ways our surface-dwelling ancestors never imagined. Another group of lunar inhabitants approached, these ones carrying objects that looked like crystalline musical instruments. They began to play, creating harmonies that resonated not just in our ears, but in our bones, our minds, our very souls. The music was communication, celebration, and welcome, all combined into an experience that transcended ordinary sound. "This is the song of return," our guide explained. "We have not used it for millions of years, but the tradition has been preserved in our collective memory. It welcomes the dawn of a new age, the reunion of separated family." The song grew more complex, and I realized that it was telling a story, the story of the lunar civilization from its earliest days to this moment of emergence. Every note carried meaning, every harmony conveyed emotion. It was history made manifest through sound. Captain Elias North stepped forward, his military bearing softened by wonder. "What happens now? How do we integrate our two civilizations?" "That choice belongs to both our peoples," the leader replied. "We will not impose our will upon you. You have earned your independence through your own struggles and achievements, but we offer partnership, guidance, and the sharing of knowledge that can benefit both our species." She gestured toward the Earth, now fully visible in the black sky above us. "Your world faces challenges that threaten your survival. Our technology can help you overcome these challenges, but the decision to accept our help must be yours." I thought of all the problems facing humanity: climate change, disease, poverty, war. The lunar inhabitants had solutions to all of these problems, technologies that could transform Earth into a paradise. But accepting that help would mean acknowledging our dependence, our status as the younger partners in this cosmic relationship. "What about our other installations?" Dr. Reynolds' voice crackled over the communication link. "Are the other lunar bases experiencing similar contacts?" The leader smiled, and the expression was both alien and familiar. "All of your people on our world are being welcomed. The emergence is global, not local. Your species is being invited to join us in a new age of cooperation and growth." The implications were staggering. Every human on the moon was witnessing this same scene, experiencing this same contact. The news would reach Earth within seconds, and the entire world would know that we were not alone. But the lunar inhabitants weren't just making contact, they were transforming their world. The emergence points continued to open, revealing more of the underground city. The surface itself was changing, becoming something that could support both civilizations. The moon was being reborn. "We have prepared for this moment for a very long time," our guide continued. "The transformation you are witnessing is not spontaneous. It is the culmination of millions of years of planning and preparation. Every aspect of our emergence has been carefully designed to minimize disruption and maximize benefit for all involved." I watched as more of the lunar inhabitants emerged, their numbers now in the thousands. They moved with purpose and grace, their actions coordinated by some form of communication that went beyond words. The guardians worked alongside them, their biomechanical forms perfectly suited to the task of reshaping the lunar surface. "How many of you are there?" Sarah asked, her scientific mind trying to grasp the scale of what we were witnessing. "Our current population numbers approximately 10 million, the leader replied casually. "We have maintained a stable population for the past million years, with each individual choosing their own path of development and contribution to our collective society." 10 million. An entire civilization had been living beneath our feet, and we had never suspected. The scale of their achievement was almost beyond comprehension. "But we are not the only ones," she added, and I felt my understanding shift again. "There are others, scattered throughout the solar system and beyond. Some chose to leave the moon entirely when we retreated underground. Others evolved in different directions, adapted to different environments. The universe is far more populated than your species has imagined." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only were we not alone, we were surrounded by intelligent life. The universe wasn't empty. It was teeming with civilizations that had chosen to remain hidden until humanity was ready to join them. "And now we are ready?" I asked. "You are approaching readiness," she corrected gently. "Your arrival on the moon demonstrated a level of technological maturity that suggested you were prepared for the next step. But the final decision must be yours. We will not force contact upon any species that is not ready to accept the consequences." The song of return reached its climax, the crystalline instruments creating harmonies that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. The lunar surface responded to the music, the transformed regolith glowing with increased intensity as the final phase of the emergence began. I looked around at my colleagues, seeing the same mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation that I felt in my own heart. We were witnessing the beginning of a new age for humanity, the moment when we would step out of our childhood and into our maturity as a species. The lunar inhabitants had been waiting for us for millions of years. Now at last we were home. Chapter 7: Integration. The first week after the emergence passed in a blur of wonder and discovery. The lunar inhabitants, I had learned they called themselves the Selenites, though their actual name was a complex concept that didn't translate directly into human language, had established contact with every human installation on the moon. The transformation of the lunar surface continued at an astonishing pace, with the regolith being restructured to support both civilizations. I had been chosen, along with Sarah, Marcus, and Captain Elias North, to serve as humanity's first official ambassadors to the Selenite civilization. It was an honor that still seemed overwhelming, especially given my background as an engineer rather than a diplomat. But the Selenites had specifically requested individuals who had experienced direct contact, and our small group had been the first to break that barrier. Our guide, who had told us to call her Nova for convenience, led us through the transformed lunar landscape to one of the primary emergence points. The entrance to the underground city had been stabilized and enhanced, creating a grand portal that seemed to welcome us into a world that had been hidden for eons. "Our cities have been maintained in preparation for this moment," Nova explained as we descended. "But they have also been adapted to accommodate visitors from your world. We want you to feel welcome, to understand that this is your heritage as much as ours." The underground city was even more magnificent than it had appeared in the vision. The crystalline spires reached toward a ceiling that had been engineered to mimic the sky, complete with artificial stars that provided gentle illumination. The buildings were grown from living crystal, their forms both organic and geometric, creating a harmony between nature and technology that humanity had never achieved. The Lunarians themselves moved through their city with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. They had adapted to their underground environment in ways that made them seem more than physical beings. Some appeared to phase in and out of visibility, while others moved through solid objects as if they were insubstantial. Their technology had allowed them to transcend many of the limitations of physical existence. You mentioned that there are others, I said to Nova as we walked through the crystalline streets. Other civilizations that evolved from your species. Where are they now? Her expression grew thoughtful. The universe is vast and our children have spread far. Some remained within your solar system, adapting to the environments of Mars, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, even the asteroid belt. Others traveled to distant stars, establishing colonies that have evolved in ways we can only imagine. And they've all remained hidden, Sarah asked, her scientific mind struggling with the implications. Not hidden, Nova corrected gently. Patient, waiting. Each civilization has chosen its own path, its own relationship with the younger species that have evolved in their absence. But all have been watching humanity with great interest. You are the first of the younger species to achieve space travel, the first to approach the threshold of cosmic citizenship. We entered one of the crystalline buildings, and I gasped at the beauty of the interior. The walls were covered with what appeared to be living murals, scenes from Selenite history that moved and changed as we watched. Their art was not static but dynamic, telling stories through time as well as space. This is our Hall of Memory, Nova explained. It contains the complete history of our civilization, from our earliest days on the surface to our current emergence. We want to share this knowledge with you to help you understand your own heritage. The murals showed scenes from the Selenite Golden Age, when the moon had been a paradise world. I saw oceans that sparkled with colors I couldn't name, forests of crystalline trees that sang in the wind, and cities that seemed to be grown from the living rock itself. It was a vision of what the moon had been, and what it could become again. Your technology could transform our world, Marcus said, his voice filled with wonder. Disease, poverty, environmental destruction, all of these problems could be solved with what you've achieved. Nova nodded. We offer this knowledge freely, but with the understanding that each species must choose its own path. Our solutions may not be your solutions. Our values may not be your values. The gift we offer is not answers, but the tools to find your own answers. The concept was both liberating and terrifying. The Lunarians weren't offering to solve our problems for us. They were offering to help us solve them ourselves. It was the difference between being given a fish and learning to fish, but on a cosmic scale. We moved deeper into the Hall of Memory, and the murals began to show the transformation, the decision to retreat underground, the engineering of their new civilization, the long sleep that had preserved them through the ages. It was a story of adaptation and survival, but also of faith and hope. The sleep was not unconscious, Nova explained. We remained aware, connected through our shared consciousness. We experienced the passage of time not as individuals but as a collective, dreaming together of the day when we would emerge to find the universe transformed. The concept of a shared consciousness was difficult to grasp, but the murals helped to illustrate it. The Lunarians had developed a form of mental connection that allowed them to maintain their identity as individuals while also participating in a collective awareness. It was a form of existence that humanity had only imagined in our most speculative fiction. Is that how you communicate with us? I asked. Through some form of telepathic connection. Telepathy is a limited term for what we do, Nova replied. We establish resonance between minds, creating a shared space where concepts can be exchanged directly. Language is a beautiful tool for your species, but it is not necessary for ours. We reached the center of the Hall of Memory, where a large crystalline structure pulsed with gentle light. Nova placed her hand on its surface, and the light intensified, creating a holographic display that showed the current state of the moon's transformation. The emergence is proceeding according to our ancient protocols, she explained. The surface is being prepared to support both our civilizations. Your bases will be enhanced and expanded, adapted to the new environment. But you will also have access to our cities, our technology, our knowledge. The display showed the extent of the transformation. The lunar surface was being restructured at the molecular level, creating a new type of regolith that could support both selenite and human needs. Atmosphere processors were being activated, slowly beginning the process of restoring the moon's lost atmosphere. This will take time, Nova cautioned. The transformation of an entire world cannot be rushed, but the process has begun and it cannot be stopped. The moon will become what it once was, a living world, a home for multiple civilizations. I thought of all the science fiction I had read, all the stories of first contact and alien civilizations. None of them had prepared me for this reality. The Lunarians weren't conquerors or saviors, they were family. They had been waiting for us to grow up, to reach the point where we could join them as equals. What about Earth? I asked. How will this transformation affect our home world? Nova's expression grew serious. Earth is your responsibility, your heritage, your future. We will not interfere directly with your homeworld unless invited, but we offer knowledge, technology, guidance. The choice of how to use these gifts is yours. It was the answer I had hoped for, but it also carried the weight of responsibility. Humanity would have to choose its own path, make its own decisions about how to use the knowledge the Selenites were offering. We couldn't simply abdicate our agency to a more advanced civilization. We spent the rest of the day exploring the underground city, learning about Selenite culture and technology. Every discovery was more incredible than the last. They had achieved a form of immortality through consciousness transfer, allowing individuals to continue their existence in new bodies. They had mastered matter manipulation at the quantum level, enabling them to create anything they needed from basic elements. They had even developed a form of faster-than-light communication that allowed them to stay in contact with their scattered children throughout the galaxy. But perhaps most impressive was their philosophy. The Lunarians had developed a worldview that integrated science and spirituality, technology and art, individual achievement and collective responsibility. They had solved the problems that plagued humanity not through force or coercion, but through wisdom and compassion. As we prepared to return to the surface, Nova took my hand one more time. "You have been changed by this experience," she said. "You carry our memories, our knowledge, our perspective. You will be an important bridge between our peoples." I could feel the truth of her words. The mental connection had left me with more than just memories. It had given me a new way of seeing the world, a new understanding of my place in the cosmic hierarchy. I would never be the same person I had been before the contact. "Will we see you again?" I asked. "We will be with you always now," she replied. "The separation is over. The moon is our shared world, our shared responsibility. We will work together to build a future that honors both our heritage and our potential." We emerged from the underground city to find the lunar surface transformed. The harsh, barren landscape I had known for months had become something softer, more welcoming. The regolith glowed with gentle light, the temperature had moderated, and the electromagnetic field created a subtle but noticeable atmosphere. The other members of the base were waiting for us, their faces reflecting the same mixture of awe and joy we felt. The emergence was complete, the transformation irreversible. The moon was no longer a dead world, it was a living home for two civilizations. I looked up at the Earth, knowing that the news of our discovery would be spreading across the world. Humanity would face a choice about how to respond to this revelation, how to integrate this new knowledge into our existing beliefs and structures. But that was a problem for another day. For now, I was content to stand on the transformed lunar surface, breathing air that carried the faintest scent of crystalline flowers, feeling the gentle warmth of a world that had been reborn. The age of cosmic isolation was over. The age of universal family had begun. Chapter 8: The Choice. The return to Earth was both necessary and dreaded. After 3 weeks of living among the Selenites, learning their ways and sharing their knowledge, The idea of returning to a world that didn't know the truth seemed almost unbearable. But we had a duty to share what we had learned, to help humanity make the choice that would determine our future. I had been chosen to lead the delegation back to Earth, along with Nova and two other Selenites who had volunteered to serve as ambassadors to humanity. The journey would be made in one of their vessels, a craft that operated on principles I barely understood, but that would reduce the travel time to mere hours. The Selenite ship was a marvel of biological engineering, grown rather than constructed, with living walls that provided atmosphere and sustenance. It was more like being inside a giant organism than a mechanical vehicle, and the experience was both unsettling and strangely comforting. As we departed from the lunar surface, I looked back at the transformed moon with a mixture of pride and sadness. The world I had helped to build was now part of something much larger, a cosmic community that had been waiting for us for millions of years. But I also felt a sense of loss for the simple life I had known before the discovery. Nova seemed to sense my conflict. "The transformation is difficult for all species," she said gently. "The knowledge that you are not alone, that you are part of something larger than your individual existence, it changes everything. But it also opens possibilities that were previously unimaginable." The journey passed quickly, filled with conversations that ranged from the practical aspects of interspecies cooperation to the philosophical implications of our shared heritage. The other two Selenites, whom I had learned to call Kale and Zara, were specialists in cross-cultural communication, chosen specifically for their ability to bridge the gap between our species. As we approached Earth, I was struck by how beautiful our world appeared from space. The blue oceans, the white clouds, the green continents, all of it seemed more precious now that I understood how rare and valuable life truly was. The Lunarians had helped to create this beauty, had nurtured it through eons of patient guardianship. Our landing was carefully coordinated with the United Nations, which had spent the past 3 weeks in emergency session debating how to respond to the revelation. The entire world knew about the Selenites now, and the response had been mixed. Some welcomed the news as proof that humanity was not alone, while others feared the implications of contact with a more advanced civilization. The landing site was a specially prepared facility in Switzerland, chosen for its neutrality and its long history of hosting diplomatic negotiations. As we emerged from the ship, we were greeted by a delegation that included world leaders, scientists, and representatives from every major religion and culture. The moment was historic beyond measure. For the first time in human history, representatives of an alien civilization stood on Earth's soil, offering partnership and cooperation to humanity. The cameras recorded everything, broadcasting the images to every corner of the globe. Nova stepped forward to address the gathered representatives, her voice carrying the same warmth and wisdom I had come to know during our time together. "Children of Earth, we come not as conquerors or saviors, but as family. We have watched your growth with pride and love, have guided your development with patience and care. Now, we offer you the choice that every mature species must face." The speech was broadcast in every language, transmitted to every device capable of receiving the signal. The entire world was watching, listening, trying to process the impossible knowledge that we were not alone. "We offer knowledge," Nova continued. "We offer technology that can solve your most pressing problems. We offer wisdom gained through millions of years of experience, but we do not offer easy answers. The challenges you face are yours to overcome. We can provide tools, but the work must be your own." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Religious leaders proclaimed the arrival of a new age of understanding. Scientists demanded access to Selenite knowledge. Politicians worried about the implications for human sovereignty and cultural identity. But the choice wasn't just being made by the gathered representatives. All across the world, people were reacting to the news in their own ways. Some welcomed the Selenites as saviors, others feared them as invaders, and many struggled to reconcile the revelation with their existing beliefs. I was asked to speak, to share my personal experience of contact with the Selenites. I tried to convey the sense of wonder and belonging I had felt, the recognition of family that had transcended species boundaries. But words were inadequate to capture the full scope of the experience. "They're not gods," I said finally. "They're not angels or demons or any of the other things humans have imagined when looking at the stars. They're our ancestors, our creators, our family. They love us in a way that's difficult to understand, but it's real. They've been waiting for us to grow up, to reach the point where we could meet them as equals." The reaction was mixed. Some people found comfort in the idea of cosmic family, while others felt threatened by the implication that humanity was not the pinnacle of creation. The religious implications were particularly complex, with different faiths interpreting the revelation in different ways. But the Selenites had anticipated this reaction. They understood that transformation was difficult, that accepting a new understanding of reality would take time. They were patient. They had waited millions of years for this moment, and they could wait a little longer for humanity to adjust. The first week on Earth was a whirlwind of meetings, presentations, and negotiations. The Lunarians demonstrated some of their technology, showing how they could purify water, heal disease, and generate clean energy. But they were careful not to overwhelm us with too much information, understanding that our societies needed time to adapt. The scientific community was particularly excited by the possibilities. The Lunarians offered knowledge that could revolutionize every field of human endeavor, from medicine to physics to environmental science. But they also emphasized that this knowledge came with responsibility. The power to transform our world also carried the risk of destroying it if used unwisely. The political implications were more complex. The existence of a more advanced civilization challenged the existing power structures that had governed human society for centuries. Some leaders embraced the opportunity for transformation, while others feared the loss of control and authority. But the Selenites were clear about their intentions. They weren't interested in governing humanity or imposing their will on our development. They wanted to be partners, guides, and mentors, not rulers. The choice of how to integrate their knowledge and wisdom would remain with humanity. As the days turned into weeks, I watched the transformation begin. Small demonstrations of Selenite technology were implemented in controlled environments, showing how their knowledge could be applied to solve specific problems. Medical conditions that had been incurable were healed, environmental damage was reversed, and new forms of clean energy were developed. But the most important transformation was happening in the minds and hearts of ordinary people. The knowledge that we were not alone, that we were part of a larger cosmic family, was changing how people saw themselves and their place in the universe. The Lunarians didn't just offer technology, they offered perspective. They showed us that our problems, as daunting as they seemed, were not insurmountable. They had faced similar challenges in their own history and had found solutions that didn't require sacrificing their values or their souls. But they also showed us that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than we had imagined. The other civilizations they had mentioned, the scattered children of the moon who had evolved in different directions, were waiting to meet us as well. The age of cosmic isolation was truly over. As our time on Earth drew to a close, Nova and I had a final conversation about the future. "The transformation will not be easy," she said. "Your species will face challenges that you cannot yet imagine, but you will not face them alone." "What about the other civilizations?" I asked. "When will we meet them?" "In time," she replied. "Each species must find its own path, make its own choices. But the door is now open. The universe is waiting for humanity to take its place among the stars." I thought about everything I had experienced, everything I had learned. The universe was far larger and more wonderful than I had ever imagined, filled with life and intelligence and beauty beyond comprehension. And humanity was part of it all, connected to a cosmic family that spanned millions of years and countless worlds. The choice had been made. Humanity would accept the Selenite offer, would join them in partnership and cooperation. The transformation would be difficult, but the rewards were beyond measure. As we prepared to return to the moon, I looked back at Earth one more time. The world was changing, evolving, growing into something new. The age of human childhood was ending. The age of cosmic citizenship had begun. Chapter 9: The Transformation. 6 months after the emergence, the moon was unrecognizable. The harsh, barren world I had known had been transformed into a living environment that supported both human and Selenite civilizations. The regolith had been restructured into a complex substrate that retained the moon's low gravity, while providing the stability needed for large-scale construction. Atmosphere processors created pockets of breathable air, and temperature regulation systems moderated the extreme conditions that had made the lunar surface so hostile. But the transformation went far beyond the physical environment. The partnership between humanity and the Selenites had accelerated our development in ways that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Medical breakthroughs had eliminated most forms of disease. Environmental technologies were reversing the damage to Earth's ecosystems, and new forms of clean energy were making fossil fuels obsolete. I had returned to the moon as one of the coordinators of the integration process, working with Nova and the other Selenite ambassadors to ensure that the partnership benefited both species. The work was challenging but incredibly rewarding, as we bridged the gap between two civilizations that had been separated for millions of years. The Selenite cities had been opened to human visitors, and the underground world was proving to be even more magnificent than it had appeared in my initial vision. The crystalline architecture, the living technology, the art and culture that had been preserved for eons, all of it was available for humanity to study and appreciate. But the integration wasn't just one way. The Lunarians were fascinated by human creativity, our ability to find beauty in imperfection, our capacity for growth through struggle. They had evolved beyond many of the challenges that still faced humanity, but in doing so they had lost some of the fire and passion that drove our species forward. "You are younger than us," Nova explained during one of our many conversations, "but in some ways you are also more vibrant. You have not yet solved all your problems, and that gives you purpose and direction. We have achieved stability, but sometimes I wonder if we have lost something in the process." The partnership was creating something new, a fusion of Selenite wisdom and human energy that was greater than the sum of its parts. Human scientists working with Selenite knowledge were making breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. Artists from both cultures were creating works that reflected the new understanding of our shared heritage. But the transformation wasn't without challenges. There were those in both species who resisted the integration, who feared the loss of identity that came with such profound change. Some humans worried about becoming dependent on Selenite technology, while some Selenites questioned whether humanity was ready for the responsibility that came with cosmic citizenship. The question of the other civilizations, the scattered children of the moon who had evolved in different directions, remained a topic of constant discussion. The Lunarians maintained contact with their cousins throughout the galaxy, but they were careful about when and how to introduce humanity to this larger cosmic community. "There are species that have chosen paths very different from ours," Nova warned. "Some have embraced technology to the point of abandoning their physical forms. Others have chosen to remain primitive, living in harmony with natural worlds. Each path has its own wisdom and its own dangers." The responsibility of serving as a bridge between species was sometimes overwhelming. I had been changed by my contact with the Selenites, had gained knowledge and perspective that set me apart from other humans. but I had also retained my essential humanity, my connection to the struggles and dreams of my species. Sarah had become one of the leading researchers in the field of cross-species medicine, working to adapt selenite healing technologies for human biology. The results were miraculous. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia were being eliminated, and the human lifespan was being extended far beyond previous limits. Marcus was working on the transformation of Earth's environment, using selenite knowledge to reverse the damage caused by centuries of industrialization. The technology was complex, but the results were already visible. Polluted waters were being cleansed, damaged ecosystems were being restored, and the climate was stabilizing. Captain Elias North had taken on the role of coordinating human selenite security operations, ensuring that the partnership remained peaceful and beneficial for both species. His military background had proven valuable in establishing protocols that protected both civilizations while respecting their autonomy. But the most profound changes were happening at the individual level. People around the world were reassessing their place in the universe, their relationship with the cosmos, their understanding of their own potential. The knowledge that we were not alone, that we were part of a larger cosmic family, was transforming human consciousness in ways that would take generations to fully understand. The Lunarians had been right to be patient. The transformation of a species could not be rushed. It required time, understanding, and a willingness to embrace change while honoring the past. But the results were already exceeding even their optimistic projections. As I stood on the transformed lunar surface, watching the Earth rise above the horizon, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. A chance discovery during a routine drilling operation had led to the greatest revelation in human history. The moon, which had seemed so empty and lifeless, had proven to be a cradle of civilization, a home for beings who had watched over humanity with love and patience. The heartbeat I had detected beneath the lunar surface had been the pulse of a sleeping world, a civilization that had waited millions of years for its children to grow up and join the cosmic community. And now, at last, that wait was over. The age of transformation was upon us. The age of universal family had begun. Epilogue: The New Age. 5 years after the emergence, I stood on the surface of Mars, watching the sunset paint the alien sky in shades of blue and green. The transformation of the solar system was well underway, with each world being adapted to support the growing cosmic community that had been hidden for so long. The Lunarians had been true to their word, offering knowledge and guidance without imposing their will on humanity. The partnership between our species had created a golden age of development that was transforming not just Earth, but the entire solar system. I had been chosen to serve as one of the coordinators of the Mars project, working with the Martian descendants of the Selenites who had chosen to adapt to the red planet's harsh environment millions of years ago. They were different from their lunar cousins, having evolved to thrive in the thin atmosphere and low gravity of Mars, but they shared the same wisdom and compassion that characterized the Selenite civilization. The Martian transformation was proceeding ahead of schedule, with atmosphere processors creating a breathable environment and temperature regulation systems moderating the extreme cold. The planet that had seemed so hostile to human life was becoming a second home for our species, a backup world that would ensure our survival even if Earth faced unforeseen challenges. But the transformation went beyond the physical environment. The knowledge that we were part of a larger cosmic family had fundamentally changed human consciousness. The old divisions of race, nationality, and religion seemed petty in the face of our shared heritage, with beings who had been traveling the stars for millions of years. The other civilizations, the scattered children of the moon who had evolved in different directions, were slowly making themselves known. Each species had chosen a different path, a different relationship with technology and nature, but all shared the same basic values that had guided the Selenites in their long journey. I had met beings who had abandoned physical form entirely, existing as pure consciousness in the vast spaces between stars. Others had chosen to remain primitive, living in harmony with natural worlds that had been untouched by technology. Each path had its own wisdom, its own beauty, its own contribution to the cosmic community. But humanity's path was unique. We had been chosen by the Selenites for special attention, had been guided and nurtured through our difficult childhood. The reasons for this special treatment were complex, but they seemed to center on our unique combination of creativity and compassion, our ability to find beauty in imperfection, our capacity for growth through struggle. As I watched the Martian sunset, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. A routine drilling operation on the moon had revealed the greatest secret in human history, had awakened a civilization that had been waiting for us for millions of years. The heartbeat beneath the lunar surface had been the pulse of a sleeping world, a world that was now fully awake and ready to embrace its cosmic destiny. The transformation of the moon had been completed, creating a world that could support both human and Selenite civilizations. The underground cities had been opened to human visitors, while the surface had been adapted to support human settlements. The partnership between our species had created something new, a fusion of wisdom and energy that was greater than the sum of its parts. But the real transformation had been in the human heart and mind. The knowledge that we were not alone, that we were part of a larger cosmic family, had changed everything. The old fears and prejudices that had divided our species seemed insignificant in the face of our shared heritage with beings who had been traveling the stars for eons. I thought about Iris Stone, the engineer who had first detected the heartbeat beneath the lunar surface. She had been changed by the experience, had become something more than human while remaining essentially herself. Her story had inspired millions of people to embrace the transformation, to accept the gift of cosmic citizenship that the Selenites had offered. The age of human isolation was truly over. We were no longer alone in the universe, no longer struggling to understand our place in the cosmic scheme. We were part of something larger, something more wonderful than we had ever imagined. The heartbeat of the moon had been the pulse of a sleeping world, a world that was now fully awake and ready to embrace its cosmic destiny. And humanity, the children of the stars, had finally come home to join the cosmic family that had been waiting for us for so long. The age of transformation was complete. The age of universal family had begun. And it was beautiful beyond measure.